In the last couple of months, I unwittingly started a series on my channel where I take scenes from the show and give my analysis about them, focusing on the subtle and unsubtle things that were said and not said, often tied to events and experiences prior to those scenes, which give them a subsequent backstory to give more of an analysis of the character's emotional states when said scenes occur. And so far, you all have liked this scene interpretation series pretty much. Now, I have done Ilya's confession call from Russia, Shane's conversation with Yuna when she found out the truth, the tuna melt scene, etc. And I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that I am open to people putting in requests for scenes they would like me to talk about. And one of such requests, it turns out, is the CCM scene, which I have to admit is one of my favorite of the early bits of Shane and Ilya's relationship because of what it says about Ilya's loneliness, the friendship it seeks to cultivate with Shane, and how even before the desire, there was the respect. And I would like to talk about that. But before I get into that, however, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been pretty instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. Now, to fully understand the beats of their CCM ad shoot together, it is important for us to take things back to the very first episode when Shane and Ilya first meet at the International Prospects Cup in Regina, Saskatchewan, because ultimately their first meeting set the tone for Shane and Ilya's relationship and exactly how they would interact with each other afterward. Now, in that scene, we established that yes, Ilya is outside smoking besides a no smoking zone sign, which Shane points out and Ilya ignores. Now, it's easy to simply look at that scene from the perspective of they had their first meet and leave it at that. But the signs are pretty much set up from this point. When Shane joins Ilya outside, Ilya is separated from the rest of his team. He's smoking alone, in quiet, with no one else beside him, isolated, which, when you consider it, is a state of being for a lot of exceptional athletes in highly competitive team sports. The fact that Ilya is alone and Shane, who also recognizes his ability and seeks him out, also does that alone, is meant to establish from the onset that these two, who are considered generational talents within their sports, are always going to be set apart from others around them. And because nobody else can quite come close to understanding their individual talents except for the other person, then it's only logical that they will be drawn to each other and by extension marketed alongside each other, as we see happen with the CCM ad shoot. But I will come back to that in a bit. So, as I was saying, Shane reaches out first. Ilya, who isn't used to kindness or the type of sportsmanship without any artifice, is initially surprised but accepts it and then smirks after Shane wishes him the best of luck in the tournament. There's a bit with the "you'll not be so nice when we beat you" line, which one is meant to speak to how Ilya has always played the sport and what he understood about it. The veneer of niceness is just that. His teammates, the rival teams they play, none of them are really that kind or good when it comes down to it, when there's a loss hanging over their heads. Shane Holland, however, is very different. Yes, he's upset about his team's loss at the International Prospects Cup, but it's more for the defeat as it relates to his skill and less about him making it personal, which is important to note because, like Ilya says, as they shake hands, they do end up seeing each other at the draft 6 months later in Los Angeles. And after Shane's hang-ups about being the second draft pick, remember, they are both established as being generational talent. So, of course, Shane is upset that he was chosen as second best compared to Ilya. And yet, even with that, when they are at the hotel's gym, both unable to sleep and get into a bit of competitive workout before they then cool down, that anger dissipates because it's part of their sports, part of their thing. But most importantly, them being together in that space creates the very first moment of vulnerability that Ilya gets to reveal in the show. Because, see, whilst their first meeting was friendly and all, I do think their time in the gym was what established them as being friends in a way. Like, sure, neither of them would admit it to the world, but it still fits. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Ilya at this point is 18 years old and recently drafted into the major hockey leagues, which means that he now has to make the move and uproot himself from Russia to the United States, relocating for the first time in his life to professionally play the sport he loves at 18. He hides it well, but the moment in the gym when he brings up Montreal being nice, we established that Ilya at this point is fishing for information. Shane agrees that yes, Montreal is awesome, which means that Ilya can then segue into the real question is always wanted to ask. Is Boston nice as well? That moment of vulnerability is when we get the glimpse that Ilya, like every other 18-year-old at this point, is a bit apprehensive about what life would be like for him in a new country. And he only lets that bit of worry through in the presence of the one person he trusts to be honest, kind, and most certainly not be cruel in their response. And indeed, Shane comes through. He can't say for certain because he doesn't live there, but from what he's heard, Boston is a great place to live. That is meant to assuage Ilya's fears. And of course, we cannot ignore the fact that their time in the gym whilst they are cooling down is spent with Shane looking at Ilya with clear desire. And Ilya, we can also assume, most certainly noticed that and kept that in mind. Now, I'm sure you're wondering at this point why on earth I'm bringing all of this up when the focus is meant to be on the CCM ad shoot. Well, it's because it all matters. Shane and Ilya's previous interactions outside of when they are playing together was a great way to set up their friendship and mutual interest in each other, but which only Ilya noticed. And this all builds to lead to after the second International Prospects Cup, when this time around Canada beats Russia to take home the cup. And at the end, when the players are shaking each other's hands, a happy Shane tells Ilya that he's looking forward to seeing him when their rookie season starts. Ilya responds with a smirk, which is meant to give us the heads up that it wouldn't take that long if he has anything to say about it. And sure enough, 6 months later, months before their rookie season is to actually start, we open on the scene for the CCM advertisement. Shane and Ilya, dressed up in their hockey gear, meet in the middle of a face off. Now, I've already talked about the significance of the CCM ad as it pertains to the commodification of Shane as it plays out within the show. And you can check that out if you're interested, because, yes, I am of the opinion that the ads within the show subtly show a gradual progression about the perception of Shane as it pertains to the general audience within the show. But back to the filming of the ad. Both Shane and Ilya meet in the middle for a face off, and Ilya kicks things off by calling Shane pretty. Shane, of course, tries to pass it off as they both being in makeup, but Ilya's insistence on calling Shane pretty is meant to indicate his interest at that point to Shane, because remember, he has noticed Shane's interest back in the gym, but is very aware that Shane does not know that the interest is noted and quite reciprocated. So, all of this is meant to set up for Ilya finally coming through. Of course, this all happens in the bathroom scene, which is a whole other scene, and we can get to like their first time and all of that if anybody's interested in me doing a video about that. But that is meant to be how it plays out. Now, we all know that Ilya has a fondness for Shane's freckles. Hell, that is something he admits to in the long game. That Shane's freckles was the first thing he noticed about him, i.e., to him, Shane has always been pretty. But prior to them shooting the commercial, Ilya's interaction with Shane has been one that has centered the sports, but not fully crossed over into him actually showing his attraction to Shane. This line was meant to establish that interest. Of course, Shane doesn't notice this at this point, but we as the audience are meant to. And then we get several scenes and clips of the two of them constantly skating to meet in the middle. If you're someone who's worked in advertising, you understand that the thing about TV shoots is that once the script is done and written and you have an understanding of the message and the tone is meant to convey, and you have picked like the actors or the ambassadors, the setting, and everything else, The work then rests on how whoever the director who is being chosen to shoot the commercial chooses to interpret it and capture it in various cuts just to have a sense of what works best. This is especially important for the CCM shoot because it's meant to present Shane and Ilya as twin entities that represent the two sides of the sports that they play. The technical play that is all about speed, calculations, pure focus, dedication, and the flashier aspects of their sports that is more for the strength, the ribbing, the chirping, the coasting on the edges of dirty play, the egomaniacal bent that makes hockey as much about putting on a good show as it is about having the highest IQ in the sport. The two sides of the game that Ilya and Shane both represent in equal measure meet in the middle as captured in the lens of a screen. They work well together because they both make a complete whole as it pertains to the sport that they play. But that is not just that. Their interactions throughout the shoot is also meant to show the varying facets of what their rivalry is. What do I mean by that? Think about how they start and what each meet in the middle means for them. The first time, it's with Ilya complimenting Shane for looking pretty. Shane, we can tell, thinks Ilya is just messing with him, which we know based on how Ilya acts on a regular basis, particularly on the rink. You can't blame Shane for thinking that way. Remember, at this point, he's not really admitted his attraction to Ilya, nor has he been made aware that said attraction is reciprocated. So he thinks Ilya is messing with him as usual. We know Ilya isn't really because he actually does mean it when he says Shane looks pretty. The second meet in the middle, Ilya isn't teasing Shane anymore. They are both serious, but walking up into the performance that is their rivalry. I say walking up because by their third meet in the middle, we get intensity, the sheer focus where their eyes are only on each other. Nobody else in the room or in the rink in that space exists for Ilya except for Shane and vice versa. This is how they've always been. This is how they compete. Clearly, this is the framing for the commercial where we are meant to see these two players who are so dedicated to their craft and focus on being the best and beating the other to get there, that is meant to jump through the screen and resonate for everyone who gets to watch the final cut of the commercial. That in this rivalry, they never take their eyes off each other. And yet, at the same time, we see the little slip. Yes, these two are rivals, but at the end of the shot, it has them letting out little smiles, a little huff that confirms that they are entertained by this. It's meant to indicate quite clearly that even whilst they carry out a performance of not being able to stand each other for others, it doesn't quite ring through in their interactions with each other, even in that commercial. And we get this as confirmation when every single shot that follows afterwards, both of them slowly can't keep a straight face. They go from smiling and holding back chuckles to full on laughing to the point where the director has to accept that these two knuckleheads are probably done for the day. Of course, he's already gotten the shots he wanted and hoped for more, but clearly Shane and Ilya can't continue to film, and so he sends them on their way. Which is how we then get the conversation between Shane and Ilya when Ilya asks Shane exactly when he knew that they were to film a commercial together. Shane responds with 2 days prior, but something in Ilya's expression has him asking when Ilya found out, to which Ilya tells Shane that it was his idea. I always found that statement interesting every time it pops up because it says several things about Ilya in that moment. One, that his position as the number one draft pick for the season gave him quite an inordinate amount of power, negotiating power, with regards how he first chooses to introduce himself to the market as a player and as a brand. And what he chooses to do is to make that leap, not alone, but with Shane, the one other player he respects, whose skill he considers comparable to his, and who he also considers a friend, the only one he's allowed himself to be vulnerable with. It seems very significant to me that for his first introduction into the North American market, he makes the active choice to not do it alone, but to do it with a person he's coming to trust, even though he hasn't admitted it to himself yet. The second thing I consider very interesting about Ilya's choice to suggest that he do the commercial with Shane is the fact that it speaks to the type of athlete Ilya is. Now, Ilya Rozanov is the number one draft pick, an elite athlete who I'm pretty sure the assumption is that he would never want to share the spotlight with another person. Athletes, especially ones of Ilya and Shane's skills and abilities, do have a massive ego, and yet this is the first hint we get within the narrative that the spot at the top is one that Ilya doesn't mind sharing with Shane. And so, of course, CCM jumps on it. It's a great chance to have a number one and number two in one commercial and not have to deal with the egotistical drama that would have risen otherwise, if not that one, this was specifically requested by the troublemaker of the duo, and two, Shane Hollander is always going to be Canada's polite and good boy. That's how he presents himself. To reiterate, I will always say that I love the fact that their first ad when they get into the big leagues is with each other, because it's such a great way to show how their personal brands both entered the market. And it's a subtle way to show that Shane and Ilya, as far as their brand image and their perception with their audience, would always be tied to each other no matter what, whether as rivals, which is the final cut that was probably aired, or as friends who happen to respect the other person's skills and want to kick their ass to show that they are the best, whilst at the same time joking and laughing around them, which is what we got with the other cuts that never made it. And I don't know about you, but I find that I like that a lot. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.